you should be looking at our canvas right now. So I'm going to give you a rundown of what you need to know for your final. So you don't need to write any of this because everything I'm saying is basically written down here. Although if someone asks something that's not written down here, you might pay attention to it. So all the information that you need is in that one module. Your final exam is, double check, I haven't screwed that up, is Tuesday. And it starts at 7 and it finishes at 10. So you notice that you're going to have an early alarm set for Tuesday. Okay. It's going to be just like your midterm. It'll be in a PDF and that will be in Canvas, right? You just click on it, PDF opens just like this. There's your questions. Your final is going to consist of 2 pieces. Section 1 is going to be 10 multiple choice. You know the A, B, C, D, pick the right letter ones. 5 points each, total of 50. I do not need to or want to see any working for those questions. Just all I want to see is number 2 is A, number 3 is D, right? That's all I want to see. Section 2 is going to have 10 questions in it, and they're going to average 25 points. And that comes to the other 250. So there's your 300 points in your final. And section 2 is what's called the long response, right? Where you write all the working down, right? If I don't see working, you ain't getting nothing, because you could simply just go to Desmos, or you could cheat and go to some software and just find out the answer was 2x. So if I don't see working, it ain't happening, because you can't get from the question to the answer in one go and tell me you did it in your head. And even if you could, I still don't give you the points. Write it down. So that's what that's. So far, so good. Now, there are going to be some questions that you do use Desmos. You might use Desmos, for instance, to solve an equation, you know, that you can't do algebraically, right? You just find out where the cross is X. You might do Desmos to look at the picture, right? Or to do something like that, or one of the other pieces of software. Desmos is just an example of that. For instance, don't we have some software that draws space curves? So you can imagine a multiple choice question where I give you the equation and 4 pictures and you have to pick the right space curve. Right? Well, that would be multiple choice, but that would be an example. Now, it's cumulative. So here is a list of everything that we've done. There is no significance, now that I've seen it, to 14.1 being functions of several variables. For some reason, it's not quite the same blue as the rest. See, blue. Kira, what color is that?
The background is kind of a robin's egg, and the highlight is more of a sky blue.
Eli, isn't that light blue with a kind of darker blue bit?
Yep, that's all there is.
That's all there is.
Mm-hmm.
Just different perspectives.
Just blue.
Just blue. So question one is going to be from sequences and series, and question 10 is going to be on partial derivatives general. So chronological order. So if you're doing a question and it's number 3, don't think week 7 work, right? Don't do whatever you were doing in week 9, right? To do a question that's quite early on. There is a Zoom link to this final. So it's not your normal class link, it's a special Zoom link. You're going to be the only people here, I believe. Double check that. Yeah, you're the only ones that are there. So, you know, like in the midterm, there's a lot of sharing going on because there was overlaps in times. And you lot are the only ones that are going to be here. So you have 3 hours to do your final. But once your final is over, you have an extra 30 minutes. And that's because I need to see your working or your answers to section 1, right? And so you've got 30 minutes to, you know, take the picture, upload it into Canvas. And when you're done, don't leave. Check in with me. And I will look at it and I will scan through it. And 9 times out of 10, it's great and you're good to go. And then you can have a party, right? But 1 out of 10 times, I'll say things like, question 5's missed. And you might say, I couldn't do that. And that's okay, right? Or oops. Well, when it's an oops, you better go and get it and upload it again. And less than that, but it does happen. I can't read it. It's too faint. It's just ain't happening. In which case, you know, find a different place to take pictures and upload it again, right? So, and when I say it's good to go, then you can go and have your party. Or in your case, Eli, pick cream for your sister's wedding dress. Right, what else have we got here then? Well, this should be a fair reflection. This final is a fair reflection of what you know, not what you can find out from other people or what you can find out from other software. So here are the things you can use and here are the things you can't. You are allowed to use the following: your TI-84 or equivalent, right? You do that a lot. Any written notes that you've got, including PDFs on computer, because some of you do your notes on an iPad and they turn into PDFs, right? They're fine, right? That's just a electronic version of a piece of paper, right? So it's the same thing. You should have a list of any formulas, even ones you don't think you need, like a unit circle formula, because you know you might have to find the sine of pi upon 4, and wouldn't a unit circle be kind of handy to have around for that kind of one-off question? But not just that, any kind of formula that you use. Couldn't you put down the ratio test formula, you know, with what you need to be convergent and what you need to be divergent, right? One of the challenges you're going to have is the amount of information that you could have. If you have 40 pages of notes, that's not a very efficient way of finding things. Because if you suddenly say, I need to know the ratio test formula, you can't, you know, it'll take you too much time, won't it, if you have to scan through it. So try and have it organized. Like, well, I like those little cheat cards, you know, the cards that look about this size, and you write down what you need and maybe on the back what they're about. And you can have a pile of them, and then you can have a pile of something else, you know, whatever makes sense to you. You know, how to do questions. Some people do like standard versions of questions, like the how to do's. And so when they say, oh, I'm doing an alternating test, I'll get the how to do an alternating test card, right, with the kind of things on it. Organize it in such a way. If you don't, you're going to be, you'll run out of time. You're going to be just overwhelmed. You're not going to be able to get to the end. If you spend 10 minutes looking for a note that you've got in one of your 40 pages, right? It's just inefficient. So that would be my advice to you. You can use any resource in Canvas that is there, because I will have Canvas on that top one, lots of, you know, like the parametric sketch function and GeoBra for surfaces and so on. All of that can be there. You can use any of those. And they're all in that module at the top, and that's its name. So here is things you can't do or cannot use. You cannot use a calculator that has got a thing called algebraic manipulation. Now, if you don't know what that is, then you're okay, because it probably means your calculator doesn't have one, or you don't know how to use it in the first place. The algebraic manipulation is some really fancy calculators will solve equations for you and do all sorts of stuff. For obvious reasons, that's not fair. Kira.
Sorry, Frid. Does that apply to like those questions where we get to the very end of it and it's like, there was ones where it was impossible to solve like a particular integral, and so we put in just the integral into the calculator and it spit out the numbers for the bounds? Does that count?
Now, when you said you put into your calculator, that was your TI-84 calculator, right?
Yeah,
that's fine, because you are allowed to use your TI-84 calculator. So if your TI-84 calculator can do it, you're okay. No, the algebraic manipulation one, it would tell you that the integral of x cubed is 1/4 x to the 4 plus c. It actually does the algebra for you, right? That's a totally different kettle of fish. Actually, I would know that you were using one because I'd have the question here and you'd have the answer down there and nothing between the two. And that's a big giveaway that you weren't doing it the way you should have. So if you don't know what one is, don't worry about it. I don't know if my calculator's got one. Well, you can't use it because you don't know what it is and you don't know how to do it. You cannot use the enter in any way except what can be found in Canvas. So you are not allowed to do things like contacting tutoring or go to help pages or basically do anything. Just keep away from the internet, right? You cannot use online computer software, right? There are software online that will solve equations. There are software online that will do almost everything in the world. I bet you, I haven't looked for one, but I bet you there's some software on the internet that will tell you whether a series converges or not. I bet you there is. I mean, there's bound to be. I haven't looked for it, but I'm sure there is. So no, don't use it. It's not allowed. You cannot communicate with any human being, living or dead. So no Ouija boards. You can't use software. You can't Zoom people, talk to people, phone a friend, internet, smoke screens, drums, hand signals, etc. Right? Because I did not specifically mention it in that list doesn't mean that it's okay. Hasn't the etc. covered the other things that I haven't thought of? Right? Just don't talk to anybody. You can, of course, talk to me, because sometimes you might say to me, does question 8 want me to do blah, blah, blah? And I will say to you, can't tell you, look at it and see what you think. Or I might say, yes, that's what it's asking you to do. But you can ask me, right? I may or may not be able to help you. So it's probably not a good idea to ask me a question like, if you're doing an alternating test, is one of the things I need to do is prove that its limit is 0, which actually is correct. The reason why you shouldn't ask me that is other people are going to say, oh, that's right, you have to prove its limit is 0. So haven't you indirectly told someone something because of the way your question was phrased? So if you think it's a dodgy question like that, put it down in the contact me, write it down thing where only I see it. If you think it could be of help to someone else. And WebAssign will have disappeared. Right, so if you went to WebAssign, the only thing you'd see is your ebook. Canvas will have disappeared except for the one module at the top that has all the information you need. Right, that'll be gone as well. So you won't be able to watch videos anymore. You won't be able to look at, solutions to midterms or anything else. So it's your job to, to be aware of that. Any questions? Okay. Let's close this.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
You said that we're not allowed to look at like the solutions to midterms. Would we be able to like download it and use it, or just we're not supposed to use that at all?
Oh, you can download it and use it, but I won't use any questions directly from the midterm. So it's helpful in the way that you'll see how to do an example of an alternating series test, right? But the alternating series test I give you, if I give you one at all, won't be that one. But you could do that anyway. You could do a homework question, couldn't you? And just download a homework question with the notes that you used to get it, and that would be equivalent. So that's not a problem.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Are we good with that page? Can I close that one off? Right. Okay. So let's go back to home. So that's what you need to know. If you click on this one, there's the Zoom link that you will. I've done that twice. There's part of the Zoom link. You don't have the password. When you click on a Zoom link, do you need to know the pass number? No, okay, so it won't matter that I forgot to put that in. But that information is already here. See, so it's basically I copied that and for some reason didn't copy all that. Right. You will click on this, and right now it's blank, but that's where your final exam is going to be, right? That's your PDF. Okay, I'll get someone in chat. They just. Okay, I can see it now. This is a question. Are the questions going to be ones that we have done at some point? Okay. For the most part, you're going to see homework online test questions. That's where I get most of my inspiration from, right? So I go and look at, I don't know, homework 4, and I go through the homework 4 and I say, oh, I like that question, and I do a version of it. So that's where my sources go. But I do like to put in thinking questions. Can you remember those questions I did in the midterm where I said sigma AN was convergent and sigma BN was convergent? What about sigma AN divided by BN? Right, and I ask you questions like that, right? I like puzzle questions like that, right? So I don't do a lot of them, but you will see ones that you should have the information to answer it. You might have to just think a bit harder about it. So,
are we gonna have the full 3 hours to work on it?
Yeah, all 3 hours plus an extra half hour to get your photocopying and uploading done.
Okay.
Okay, so final exams and meeting.
Sorry, Professor.
Yes.
Margaret has a question that she posted to a chat to you, but her mic is not working right now.
I think that was the question I just answered a second ago, Jed. Thank you.
Okay, got it.
So where are we? That's it. But so let's just look at some of the stuff here. You know, there's Desmos. Isn't Desmos kind of fun to do some graphing if you need to do something with 2D graphing? What other ones could we do? There's that guy. So for instance, if you were interested in a space curve, and why are they capitals? I have no idea. This may not be the right format for this one. If it isn't, I will figure it out later. Right, that should work. Come on. Oh, there you go. Do you see I've just drawn a line in 3D? If I put a second line in, you see that these 2 lines, if you orientate them, and then you look, aren't they skewed? Right. Do you know those questions where here are 2 lines, are they parallel, are they skewed, you know, are they identical? If that was a multiple choice question, wouldn't you just put it into the software and look? Do you see how quick it is to do that question? Because in multiple choice, if it lasts more than 3 minutes, you're doing it wrong. Now, if I went and said to you, these 2 equations, and it was section 2, and I wanted to know, are they parallel, are they skewed, you know, and so on, wouldn't you have to do all the math to prove it to me? So see the difference is the same question would have, depends on which it's in, right? So that's an example of some software. So let me just reiterate that a little bit. If you were in section 1, you just basically say question 3, the answer is A. That's all I will say. So if it was that one that we just did there, A might be that they're skewed, right? And that's all I would say. I would say A. Now, if it was in section 2, wouldn't you first check, you know, if you had your 2 lines, column S. The first one was 1 plus t, 2 minus t, 3t. Let's say the fourth one was, the second one was that. If I asked you to find out if these 2 were parallel, skewed, or identical, wouldn't you have to show me working? You wouldn't just say they're skewed, and walk away, right? Because in this question, you would prove to me or whatever, right? You'd have to show me. So I could prove, first thing I would do is check parallel. If you look at that one here, 1 minus 1, 3 is its direction vector. If you take the second one, it's this guy here, its direction vector is 2, 1, 4. Are those two vectors parallel? And the check, if they were parallel, wouldn't these, and these all be equal to each other? Right? Now, they could intersect, couldn't they? Or they could be skewed. If you wanted to prove they intersect or skewed, you would match up the x's and you'd match up the y's, and you would solve that system of equations, or at least try to solve it. And let's just say, for argument's sake, I know it's not true, that t equals 1 and s equals 2 is the solution, just for argument's sake. Then you would check by plugging into here and here. And in the z coordinates, 3t gives you a z coordinate of 3. And in the other one, it's 4s plus 1. And 4 times 2 plus 1 gets you 9. What does the fact that this z coordinate is not the same number as that one tell you about these two straight lines?
They're skewed.
They're skewed. And pretend again that they were both 9. What does that tell you?
They intersect.
They intersect. In fact, not only do they intersect, can't you then tell me the coordinates of where they intersect by plugging t equals 1 in here and s equals 2 in here, and you get it. Do you see how that question is a lot more detailed and a lot more going on than the section 1 question, which says, here are 2 lines, parallel, skewed, intersect, or identical, right? That'd probably be the 4 choices, right? In the top one, wouldn't you just draw the picture and say, yep, they're skewed? In the second one, wouldn't you have to do a whole load of math to prove to me that they are skewed, or prove to me that they are intersect? You can't just write down the word skewed and move on, because that's not going to get you any points, because you could just go skewed. Did I tell you the joke about the student who is really bad? Math student. Never turned up for class, was always late. Day of the final, he turns up halfway through, comes in, gets the test paper, sits down at the table in front, it's the only spare one, and looks at the questions, and a big smile goes in his face. It was a true, false 10 questions. And the student, and the professor's watching him, student looks at the first question and goes like this. What's the answer to? Second question, recoin. Does all 10 questions. Professor's watching him and he's thinking, well, I know what he's doing. And gets to the last question. And then instead of getting, bringing the paper to him, he turns over at the beginning and he goes down and he goes like that. Oops. Oh. He goes over and he says, what are you doing? He says, I'm checking my answers. Oh, come on. Okay, another one. Student, Kira, only one success. Seahawks, this student is a Seahawks fan. But only in exams, he turns up with all his Seahawks stuff on, right? His t-shirts, gloves, the lot. And his friends finally get round and they say, why do you always wear your Seahawks stuff when you're doing exams? And he says, well, I always know I'm going to pass even when I shouldn't. Jade got that joke. Jade, Do you want to tell everybody why that's allegedly funny?
I'm not like a big like football person, but my parents are, and they used to like watch the Seahawks all the time. So
And that happened, didn't it?
so
once?
there's I think it was more than once that there were a lot of things that I just remember my parents just screaming at the TV to not pass the ball. So
If you know that they could have won a second Super Bowl at the last seconds, and they went and passed the ball and when they shouldn't have, they should have ran it, allegedly. Okay, let's get started. Before I forget, Monday is a class day. So if you turn up on Monday, you can go over any questions that you might have, any topics, and leave when you want, or you can choose not to turn up. You're going to get attendance anyway. Chuck a topic at me. I know it's not a lot of time, but we'll do what we can. Or just ask me a question, anything at all. It's pretty open-ended right now.
Can you go over the series and sequences real quick?
No, I can't go over sequences and series real quick because there's about 6 weeks of work. I could
Wait, like what was the one at the beginning?
Yeah, the one at the beginning is called sequences. I can do that. So essentially in sequences, there are a number of typical questions that you get. Let's start off with, how do you write down a sequence? Well, the most common way to write down a sequence would be to give you a formula. That's a very common way. And what that says is that the nth number in the sequence, we call it the nth term, is given by this formula. So if you wanted to know what the first number in the sequence is, it would be 1 squared plus 1 over 2 lots of 1 squared. And that would end up being the number 1. And if you wanted to know the second term, then it would be 2 squared plus 1 over 2 lots of 2 squared. That's 5/8. And so you would have your sequence and it would go 1, 5/8, and then forever. So one question might just be, what is the 10th term of a sequence? So you can imagine in a multiple choice world, that would be a reasonable question. And I said to you, what is the 10th term? Well, I would write it like that, or I might say 10th term. And the answer would be 10 squared plus 1 all over 2 lots of 10 squared, which is 101 over 200. And there's your answer. Another typical thing that you get asked about sequences is, what is the limit of a sequence? And the answer to this can be one of 3 things. The limit could be a number. It could be the limit is 5 or 3/7. It could be the limit is infinity. In other words, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And the limit could be it does not exist. Each one of them is a valid answer. So here are some examples of each one happening. If I gave you the sequence that I just did here, and I asked you to calculate the limit of that sequence, can't we just do the normal calc 1 process? Couldn't I do divide top and bottom by n squared or use L'Hopital? Great. That's the 2 most obvious ways to do this. If you use L'Hopital, then think of that as an x. You would get the limit as n tends to infinity of 2n over 4n, which cancels down to a half. So the limit of that would be a half. If you wanted to divide the top and bottom by n squared, which is equally valid, you'd get 1 plus 1 over n squared over 2. You then do brute force. 1 over infinity is 0. And so you get a half. So that would be that situation. Well, now, sometimes you can get a limit that is infinitely big. If I went and said e to the n over n. I would do this one definitely with L'Hopital. Differentiate. Plug in infinity, just brute force, and the answer is infinity. And that would be that one. And the third possibility, a limit of a sequence could be undefined, does not exist, I should say. That's an example of one. Would you agree that if you calculate the sine of n, think of n as x, since it's whole numbers, won't you be getting a guy there, a guy here, a guy here, a guy here, a guy here, a guy here? Won't it just randomly jump up and down between 1 and -1 for eternity? Would you agree that if n goes to infinite, there is no fixed value? The limit does not exist. How would that work? If I was doing that as a multiple choice question, you'd get the sequence, and I would say A, it is a half, B, it's 2, C, it's infinity, D, it does not exist, right? That would be the kind of choices I would give, right? And you would choose the appropriate letter for the question.
Got it, thanks.
Oh, on sequences, there is one more, which are called recurrence relations. And they look quite different. There's a recurrence relation for you. Does anybody know what this sequence generates? No? You get A1 and you get A2, right? So that's 1 and 1. If you want to get A3, it's A2 and A1. So you get 1 plus 1, just 2. If you want to get A4, it's A3 and A2. So you basically get 1 add 2, you get 3. Do you recognize the Fibonacci sequence? Right. Have you ever heard about the Fibonacci joke? It's better than the last two jokes. No, 2 add 3, 5, right. You can also get a recurrence relationship that looks like this. You can't really easily solve what is the limit of this type of sequence, just too messy to do. But you can do this one. I can calculate the limit of this one. If you make the limit as n tends to infinity of both sides, call that guy L. This guy, 0.3L plus 20. Subtract and the answer is that. So you can actually find the limit of a recurrence relationship by basically just saying, well, what would happen if n went to infinite? That would become a number L. That would be the same number L, because, you know, if you're going to infinity, infinity plus 1 and infinity are the same place, essentially. So that would be L. That would be 0.3, the same thing, L, plus a 20, and then solve the equation, and you can get it. You can't do that for Fibonacci sequences, but you can do that when there is only one guy here and obviously one guy there. Okay. Another question. Anybody got? Kira, what's your question?
I was just wondering if there would be any kind of like practice test or anything we should be looking at for reference for that.
Normally there would be, but not this quarter. I have been just overwhelmed by having, and it's self-inflicted, I have 5 different classes, right? Not like 3 Calc 1s and 2 Calc 2s. If that was the case, it would make my life dead easy because I only need to do it once, right? But I have, looking for sympathy here, what do I have? I have a stats class, a trig class, a Calc 1 class, a Calc 3 class, and a Calc 4 class. I just don't have the time. I'm making 5 new finals as well. And I'm just looking for sympathy again. You wouldn't believe how much work it is to make just one multiple choice. First, I have to pick the question, get the right answer. And what takes most time is figuring out good wrong answers. What are the types of things students do wrong in these questions? Then deliberately do that. What answer would they get and put that in my list? So be careful when you do multiple choice that just because you got 7/11ths and one of my answers is 7/11ths, that yes, I got it. Hopefully it does mean that, but couldn't it also mean you screwed up in a way that I thought you might screw up and that's why you got 7/11ths? So if you do that times 5 classes, I have to make up 50 brand new multiple choice questions. And they are literally taking me 10 minutes each. So you put that, that's just my problem. Now, it's not your problem, but I like moaning because it makes me feel better. So the short line is no. But look up your midterm, look up every online test you've done, look at your homework. The vast majority of questions are going to come straight out of the same sources. So you won't be too surprised, I hope.
Fair enough. That kind of actually leads into part B of my question, which is, do you have any tips for us doing the multiple choice? Because the midterm, the multiple choice was the one that seemed the hardest.
It is. It's always is the hardest one to do. And I've never quite figured out why. I don't think I'm making them any harder. There are a couple of strategies. The big strategy that I do for everything is do the ones you know how to do first and leave the horrible ones to the end, including multiple choice. If the method you think is going to take you more than about 3 or 4 minutes, you're doing it wrong. Let me hark back to, remember the 2 straight lines? Wasn't that simply just go into the software and draw the damn thing? You see, that took about a minute, probably, tops. If I thought I had to do all that algebra right the second way, would you agree that would take me a lot longer than that? And therefore, that was not the way to do that multiple choice question. So think about how you're going to solve it. And if you think, well, the only way I can think of doing this question would be to do this and then do that, and then I'd have to figure out that after it, then throw that idea right out the window, because that's not how you should do it. Sometimes you can look at a multiple choice and kick out a couple as pretty sure that they're wrong, right? If you look at a sequence and you look at it, you get a feeling for that one looks weird. I don't think 0 makes sense. I can never see that ever being a 0, right? Then you can, and okay, it's still guessing, but maybe you can guess out of 2 choices rather than out of 4 or 5. Can't think of any off the top of my head. Experience is helpful. If you've done enough questions, you just get used to questions and you say, oh yeah, I know that one, right? This is how you typically do it, and you do it. Brush up on your Calc 2. What do I mean by that? You know that in the integration test, you have to integrate things. Do you know that in space curves, you have to integrate things? So if I went and said to you, what is the integral of 1/1 plus t squared? What is the integral of 1/1 plus t squared?
Be inverse tan.
Be inverse tan. Now, if anybody here who's listening didn't remember that, aren't you going to have a problem if that's something that you have to integrate? So you also have to differentiate, don't you? Don't you have to prove things that are decreasing? So won't you have to differentiate things? So you'll have to be good at product rule, quotient rule, and chain rule. So Calc 1 and Calc 2 are not things you don't need to worry about. Aren't Calc 1 and 2 things that get used in a lot of places in different ways in Calc 3? So brush up on that. Some little things catch people out. I'm using T rather than X. If I asked you to differentiate this guy, the answer is not just e to the t squared, is it? What's missing?
2t.
2t. You know, little things like that can catch you. Now that one people don't get caught out on. Strangely enough, they do get caught out in that one. See, when it's e to the t squared, doesn't make you think, oh, there's a t squared there, I should deal with it. But for some reason, isn't e to the 2t almost like ignorable? And so you tend to just write down that guy. So just be, you know, sometimes the simple ones will catch you rather than the hard ones. What's the inverse tan of infinity?
Is it pi over 2?
It is. Do you know what a lot of people think it is? Infinite. I think it's infinity. You know, little details, you know, the devil's in the detail, isn't it? Little things that you just, I would say careless is too strong a word, but you know, you're not paying enough attention to, right? Can catch out. The good news is, as long as it's not multiple choice, I will see your work. And if I notice that you missed a 2, but everything else that you did before it and after it was correct, then you don't lose all your points, right? You lose some points because you did one piece of it wrong, but the process is right. Of course, in a multiple choice question, one of my answers use that and the other answer will use that. And you see why you get multiple choice questions wrong. Because I will pick one of the main mistakes I know students make and put that down as one of my answers. So now that I've thought about it, that probably explains why multiple choice tends to be done so badly, because you can only be right. There isn't, you know, right or wrong. There's no grey. Whereas in section 2, can't you be wrong, but 90% of what you did was right, so you still get 90% of the points. So